The Odyssey was a gutted freighter, her hold stripped of cargo and filled with hastily installed medical pods, experimental bioreactors, and a mountain of unproven, synthesized chemicals. On the bridge, Captain Eris Thorne watched the starfield warp and bleed around them. The FTL drive, pushed beyond its safety limits, groaned in protest. Concord Channel 1 is just repeating the quarantine order, Captain, Comms Officer Lynn said, her voice tight. They're demanding we reverse course. Vehemently. Let them demand, Eris replied, his eyes on the data streaming across his screen. The gray rot. A biomechanical plague of horrific efficiency. It didn't just kill life, it disassembled it at a cellular and technological level, reducing everything to an inert, gray slurry. The Concorde's answer was always fire, planetary sterilization from orbit once the last light of a world went out. Science Officer Kale, a xenobiologist with 3 doctorates and a deep-seated fear of open spaces, floated up from his console. The latest luminous transmission before calm silence, the morphological decay rate is accelerating. Their crystalline biology is hypersusceptible. We have an estimated window of 72 standard hours before total ecosystem collapse. And our window? Eris asked. To land, establish a field lab, run analysis, formulate a counteragent, and deploy it? Optimistically? 160 hours. The bridge was silent, save for the hum of strained systems. They all knew the math. It was impossible. Suicide. The Concorde isn't just advising against this, sir, Lynn said quietly. The Ventari ambassador specifically stated that any breach of the cordon would be considered a hostile act. They've positioned a Sentinel cruiser at the quarantine boundary. Eris leaned back. He was a man who had left Mars to become a deep space haulier, only to find his ship and crew conscripted by a desperate, unified Earth government for this one insane mission. What did the ambassador call us? Lynn sighed. A contagion of sentiment. Said our irrational compassion was as dangerous as the rot itself. Eris allowed himself a grim smile. Compassion. They make it sound like a weakness. He stood, addressing the bridge crew, humans from every corner of Earth, a handful of brave IKRN defectors who believed in their cause, and one grizzled old Tarkellan engineer who just liked fixing broken things. They have their logic. Their survival calculus. It tells them to let 3 billion beings die to preserve the greater whole. Our calculus is different. Our calculus says not today. We go in. We find a way. We do the impossible because it's the right thing to do. And if the universe doesn't like it, the universe can get out of our way. The Odyssey dropped out of FTL at the edge of the luminous system. Before them, hanging in the black, was the Ventari Sentinel, a sleek vessel of polished obsidian, weapons gleaming. The planet below, once shimmering with opalescent light, was now mottled with ugly, spreading patches of gray. Human vessel Odyssey, a cold, synthesized voice crackled over the calm. This is your final warning. Cross the cordon, and you will be fired upon. Your species' recklessness ends here. Eris looked at the planet, then, at the Sentinel. Lynn, open a channel. All frequencies. He took a breath, his voice calm but carrying the weight of a world's stubborn hope. Sentinel vessel, this is Captain Eris Thorne of the Earthship Odyssey. We are not here with weapons. We are here with medicine. We are here to help. You can shoot us down. But you will have to explain to the galaxy why you opened fire on an unarmed medical vessel. You will have to explain why you were so afraid of our help. The silence stretched. The Sentinel's energy cannons glowed with a threatening charge. We are proceeding, Eris said, cutting the channel. Helm, take us in. Full evasive. They might not aim to kill, but they'll try to disable. The Odyssey dove toward the planet, a clumsy metal whale against a sleek predator. The Sentinel fired not plasma bolts, but kinetic net projectors and targeted EMP bursts. The ship shuddered as a net snagged their port engine, dragging them into a spin. Alarms blared. Shields at 40%. Primary thrusters losing power. Helm shouted. Kale, is the landing pod ready? Eris barked, gripping his chair. Yes, but Captain, you can't. I'm not. You are. Eris turned to the scientist. You and your medical team. You're going down in the pod. The Odyssey will be a distraction. We'll draw the Sentinel's fire, give you a window to reach the surface. Kale's face paled. The surface? But, the protocol, the rot, is why you're here, Doctor, Eris said, his voice softening. Go. Save who you can. As the Odyssey corkscrewed through another volley of EMP bursts, the medical pod, a sturdy, sealed capsule, shot away from the main ship, burning towards the stricken world. The Sentinel, momentarily confused, split its focus. It was all the advantage the Odyssey needed. Eris watched the pod disappear into the atmosphere, a tiny spark of hope against a canvas of despair. All right, he said, a fierce grin spreading across his face. Now, let's show this shiny tin can what a reckless human crew can really do. Evasive pattern delta. And, somebody get on that net with a plasma torch. The real mission, the impossible task, had now begun on the gray-stricken surface below. The Odyssey's fight was just a distraction. The true battle for life was just beginning. Document 2. The medical pod tore through the sickly yellow atmosphere of the luminous homeworld, Kale fighting the controls. The external cameras showed a nightmare. Where majestic, spiraling crystalline forests once stood, there were only crumbling gray pillars. Rivers of glowing sapphire were now stagnant, ashen sludge. The pod's sensors screamed with biohazard warnings. They landed with a jarring crunch in what had once been a communal plaza. The buildings around them, beautiful structures of resonant quartz, were now brittle and weeping gray tears of decay. Kale, suited in a bulky, environmentally sealed biosuit, stepped out with his team of 10 humans and 2 IKRN medics. The silence was profound, broken only by the mournful wind whistling through dead crystal. Life signs? Kale asked, his voice muffled by the suit. Faint. Clustered about 2 kilometers east, in a large structure, one of his team, Jax, reported, pointing a scanner. But, the atmospheric rot density is catastrophic. Our suit filters won't last more than 12 hours at this concentration. They moved, their boots crunching on gray dust that was once vibrant life. They found the source of the life signs, the grand resonant chamber, a cathedral-like space where the luminous used to gather for symphonies that could reshape crystal with sound. Now, it was a hospice of despair. Thousands of luminous were huddled together. Their bodies, naturally formed of living, light-conducting crystal, were dull, fractured, and streaked with invasive gray veins. Their inner light, usually a kaleidoscope of emotion, was guttered to a faint, painful flicker. At the center of the chamber, a particularly large and ancient luminous, its form now web-cracked with gray, raised a trembling, crystalline arm. A soft, chiming voice, translated by Kale's device, whispered in their minds. You should not be here. The great chorus has abandoned us. The song of our world ends. Kale approached, careful not to touch anything. We are from Earth. We are here to help. To find a cure. A ripple of weak, discordant chimes echoed through the chamber. Cure? There is no countersong. The gray note consumes all. Leave. Save yourselves from our silence. We're not leaving, Kale said, setting up his portable lab with frantic speed. I need to take a sample. To understand it. The process was delicate. Using a laser scalpel, he extracted a minute fragment of the gray material from a non-sentient crystal formation. Under the mobile microscope, it was a horror of efficiency. Nanoscale machines, of unknown origin, were actively disassembling the complex crystalline lattice, reducing it to base minerals and stealing its energy to replicate. It was technology, but of a malevolent, perfect kind. It's not just a plague, Kale whispered to his team. It's a weapon. A bioweapon set to consume. The Concord didn't just quarantine this place out of fear, they might have known it was engineered. Unstoppable. His theory was confirmed when Jax, exploring a side chamber, found a communication console, partially degraded. He managed to extract a corrupted data fragment. It was a Ventari transmission, sent before the cordon was established. The deciphered fragment was chilling, *source confirmed. Gray Rot Agent is Class 12 prohibited. Luminous World is forfeit. Containment is the only viable, the rest was static. They knew, Jack said, his voice hollow. They knew exactly what it was, and they wrote this world off from the start. Back on the Odyssey, the situation was dire. The Sentinel had crippled their FTL drive and primary weapons. They were running on maneuvering thrusters, a wounded bird dodging a hawk. Captain Eris, however, had turned desperation into a weapon. They're trying to herd us away from the planet, he observed, studying the tactical map. They won't fire to destroy, just to disable. They want us alive to make an example of us. That's their mistake, Lynn said, a sly smile on her face. She had been hacking into the public Concord newsbands. The galaxy is watching. The feat of a human medical ship being hunted while trying to deliver aid is causing unrest. There are protests on the IK-Aran home moons. Even some Ventari academic circles are questioning the logic. Eris nodded. Good. Keep the spotlight on. Helm, take us closer to the Sentinel. Let's make this a very public, very messy game of chicken. On the surface, Kale had a breakthrough. The Rot nanites were vulnerable to a specific, high-frequency resonance, a song the luminous zone bodies produced at their healthiest state, but which the plague actively suppressed. It was a key. But they needed to amplify that frequency on a planetary scale, and they needed a carrier, a medium to deliver a disabling counternote to every nanite simultaneously. The atmosphere is saturated with crystalline dust from the decay, Kale realized, looking at his data. If we can turn the planetary weather system itself into a delivery mechanism, but we'd need a transmitter powerful enough. Something like, he looked up at the sky, then, at the communication spire of the Grand Chamber, still mostly intact. He contacted the Odyssey. Captain, we have a theoretical solution. But, we need the Odyssey's main comms array, tuned to a very specific frequency, linked to the planet's own resonant spire. And, we need it in orbit, now. Eris, in the middle of a tense evasive maneuver, laughed. You want me to bring our barely functioning ship, which is currently being used as target practice, into a geosynchronous orbit over your head? Yes. And, you need to do it in the next 4 hours. Before the last of the luminous inner light goes out. Their life force is the only template for the counter-frequency. Eris looked at his battered crew, at the damaged ship, and at the relentless Sentinel on the screen. He switched the comm to the planet-wide channel the Sentinel was monitoring. Sentinel vessel, this is Captain Thorne again. I have an update. My science officer has a cure. We're going to implement it. You can continue to try and stop us, and be remembered forever as the murderers of a world that could have been saved. Or, you can stand down. For once, you can choose hope over fear. The response was immediate and violent. A plasma burst, hotter and more focused than before, seared across the Odyssey's bow, breaching the hull in 2 compartments. The ship lurched. This time, the warning was lethal. The Sentinel's cold voice returned. There is no cure. Only contagion. Stand down, humans, or the next shot is for your reactor. The line was drawn. In the Grand Chamber below, the light of the ancient luminous was fading fast. The gray tendrils crept upward. The clock had run out. The Odyssey was crippled, and the Sentinel had finally decided to kill. Document 3 Chaos reigned on the Odyssey. Klaxons wailed as Atmolos sirens blared from the breached compartments. Crew and magbooths scrambled to seal emergency bulkheads, the screams of escaping air a dying whistle. On the bridge, the air was thick with smoke and tension. Hull integrity at 32%. Deck 4 is gone. Helm reported, her hands flying over scorched controls. We've lost lateral control. We're in a slow drift toward the planet's gravity well. Captain Eris gripped the armrests of his command chair, his knuckles white. The viewport showed the Sentinel, pristine and predatory, turning for a final, killshot alignment. They were out of time, out of maneuvers, and almost out of options. Captain! Lynn shouted, her voice cutting through the din. Incoming transmission, wideband. It's the IK-Aran home fleet. A new voice, raspy and layered with harmonic tones, filled the bridge. Ventari Sentinel, this is Flight Marshal Creek of the IK Aran Skywing. You are targeting a vessel on a humanitarian mission. This action violates the Concorde's own charter on medical neutrality. Stand down. On the tactical screen, 3 IK Aran dart ships, sleek and fast, emerged from a micro-warp point. They were smaller than the Sentinel, but they positioned themselves in a defensive triangle around the listing Odyssey. The Sentinel's response was haughty. This is a quarantine enforcement. The human vessel is spreading dangerous ideals and risking galactic safety. Withdraw, IK Aran, or be considered complicit. Krik's reply was immediate. The only danger we see is your willingness to kill to preserve your sterile peace. We are complicit. Complicit in the belief that a civilization is measured by how it treats its doomed. The IK Aran ships powered weapons, a clear, defiant challenge. It was a stalemate. A deadly one. But it bought seconds. On the planet, Kale watched the standoff on a portable feed, his heart in his throat. The ancient luminous before him was moments from final collapse. Its light was a faint, dying ember. The frequency template, Kale pleaded, holding a sensor node to the being's fractured chest. We need the pure song of your health, the resonance before the rot. Can you give it to us? One last time? The luminous chimed, a sound so soft it was almost inaudible. My song is ended. The chorus is silent. No, Kale said, an idea forming, desperate and wild. He switched his comms to the open channel linking him to the Odyssey and the thousands of dying luminous in the chamber. Your chorus isn't silent. It's right here. He turned to his team. Hook every audio sensor, every bioscanner, every damn thing we have that can record resonance into the main console. Jax, get me a link to the planetary comm network, every surviving speaker, every crystal that can still vibrate. He then addressed the chamber, his voice amplified. Luminous. You can hear me. You are not alone. The galaxy turned its back, but we are here. And we need your help. Think of your world as it was. Think of your brightest memories, your greatest joys. Sing, not with your voices, but with the light of your souls. Give us your song. For a moment, nothing. Then, a single, weak chime from a small, cracked luminous in the corner. Then, another. And another. Flickers of light, weak and broken, began to pulse in the gloom. It was not a symphony. It was a ragged, painful, desperate cry. But it was a cry of defiance. Kale's equipment began to pick it up, a raw, chaotic, but fundamentally healthy resonance, the innate frequency of untainted luminous life. It's working. I'm getting a composite waveform. Jax yelled. In orbit, Eris saw his chance. The Sentinel was momentarily distracted by the IK Aran. Helm. All remaining power to the main thrusters and the comms array. Point that dish at the planet, now. Link it to Kale's feed. But, Captain, the gravity well will be pulled in. Just do it. The Odyssey shuddered as its main engine, damaged and sputtering, fired at full burn, not to escape, but to hold position. The massive communications array on its spine, half melted from earlier hits, groaned as it swung toward the world below. Data streamed from the planet, the desperate, collective song of the dying. Kale's console synthesized it, purified it, and amplified it a billionfold. Transmitting the counter-frequency now. Captain, you have to broadcast it on the full spectrum, modulate it through the planet's own ionosphere. The Odyssey's array glowed with energy it wasn't designed to hold. Lynn, at her station, bypassed every safety protocol. Broadcasting. It's going to fry our systems in 60 seconds. The signal, a wave of pure, healing resonance, shot from the Odyssey and hit the planet's atmosphere. It was picked up and amplified by the natural crystalline dust, by the dead spires, and, most importantly, by the Grand Chamber's own communications spire, which acted as a gigantic planetary speaker. On the surface, a miraculous and terrifying thing began to happen. The gray patches on the ground and buildings started to vibrate. A high, piercing whine filled the air as the rot nanites, subjected to their anathema frequency, began to shatter and deactivate. The gray decay didn't vanish, but it stopped spreading. It became inert, dead mineral. But, for the living luminous, it was agony. The counter-frequency attacked the rot within them, a violent, internal war. Their chiming became screams of crystal pain. Some of the weaker ones shattered completely. "It's too much," Jax cried. "We're killing them to save them." Kale watched in horror. He had miscalculated. He'd stopped the plague, but the cure was as lethal as the disease. The ancient luminous at the center let out a final, clear, and heartbreakingly beautiful chime, a note of forgiveness, before its light went out forever. In orbit, the Sentinel, seeing the planet-wide gray modeling cease its expansion, was stunned into inaction. The IK-Aran held their position. The Odyssey, its systems overloading, went dark and silent, beginning an irreversible tumble into the atmosphere. They had stopped the rot. But they had failed to save the luminous. And, now, they were going to burn up in the sky of the world they had tried to rescue. The cost of their compassion seemed to be total. Document 4: Silence and Fire. The Odyssey was a deadweight, trailing plasma as it scraped the upper atmosphere. On the bridge, emergency lights cast long, frantic shadows. Gravity was gone, replaced by the sickening, erratic spin of the dying ship. Main power is offline. Backup batteries at 15%. Life support failing on all decks, Helm reported, her voice eerily calm in the cacophony of alarms. Trajectory puts us into a full burn-up in 9 minutes. Captain Eris floated near the viewport, watching the brown and gray planet swell beneath them. There was no fear on his face, only a profound, weary regret. They had gambled everything. They had changed the paradigm. And they had lost. "Any word from the surface?" he asked quietly. Lynn, her console sparking, shook her head. "Comms are dead." The last transmission from Kale was the screaming. She looked down, her shoulders slumping. Then, a new light appeared on her dead console. A single, blinking icon. An incoming signal, not on any standard Concord channel, but on an old, almost forgotten Earth emergency frequency. "Captain. I'm getting something. It's weak, but it's from the surface. It's Kale." Eris pushed off the viewport, grabbing a handhold near her station. "Put it through." Kale's voice was cracked, breathless, but buzzing with a desperate energy. "Odyssey, do you read? The broadcast, it worked. The rot is inert. It's stopped. But, the luminous, we're losing them. The frequency is too harsh for their weakened state. It's purging the nanites, but it's shredding their crystalline matrix in the process." "We figured," Eris said, his voice heavy. "We're on our way down, Doctor. Permanently. Not much we can do." "No. Listen. There's a secondary effect. The inert rot material, it's resonant. It's absorbing the leftover healing frequency and re-radiating it. A softer, harmonic echo. The ones who survived the initial purge are being bathed in it. They're fractures. I think they're stabilizing. But it's not enough. They need a sustained, gentle resonance to heal, to rebuild. They need a new song." Eris understood. The cure was a scalpel. The healing required a melody. And their scalpel ship was about to crash. He looked at his crew, their faces illuminated by flashing red lights. They were engineers, navigators, cooks, and dreamers. They were not a medical team. They were a distraction that had become a catalyst. And their part was over. Or was it? The ship's crystal drive core, the old Tarkellan engineer, Grant, rumbled from the darkness near the engineering station. He was clinging to a conduit, his fur matted with coolant. Is not just for FTL. Is big, stupid quartz battery. Holds energy in resonant state. If we dump all power into it, set it to vibrate with Kale's soft frequency, and if ship hits ground near Big Spire, Eris's mind raced. The drive core's resonance, amplified by the planet's own crystalline geology, it could act as a permanent healing beacon. He finished the thought. But, to do that, we'd have to survive the crash with the core mostly intact, and manually trigger the overload. Is suicide mission, Grant stated plainly. Eris smiled. It was a real smile, the first in hours. We were on a suicide mission the moment we left Earth, Grant. This way, it actually means something. He switched to the ship-wide intercom, the batteries straining to power his voice. All hands, this is the captain. Abandoned ship protocol is cancelled. I repeat, cancelled. We are not evacuating. We are going to land this ship. It will not be a gentle landing. Our new mission is to get the Odyssey down in one piece, as close to the luminous Grand Chamber as possible, and use her heart to sing a lullaby to a broken world. If anyone has objections, get to an escape pod now. No shame in it. He waited. No one moved. On the bridge, Lynn secured her harness. Helm gripped her controls, her eyes fixed on the approaching terrain. Grant began furiously rerouting power conduits. All right then, Eris said, taking his seat and strapping in. Helm, you have the con. Find us a parking spot. What followed was not a landing. It was a controlled, screaming catastrophe. With no engine power, Helm used the last of the maneuvering thrusters and the ship's remaining magnetic fields to interact with the planet's own mineral deposits, skidding the massive hull across a plain of dead crystal toward the towering spire of the Grand Chamber. The shriek of tearing metal was deafening. The viewport cracked. The Odyssey plowed a trench a kilometer long, coming to a final, earth-shattering rest just 500 meters from the base of the spire, tilted at a 45-degree angle. Miraculously, the hull, though breached in a dozen places, held. The crew was battered, bloody, but alive. And, deep in the engineering bay, the FTL drive core, a massive cylinder of aligned quantum crystal, was intact. On the surface, Kale and his team, who had witnessed the ship's fiery descent and brutal landing, rushed toward the wreck. They found Eris and Grant already cutting their way into the core chamber with plasma torches. The core is stable, but containment is failing, Grant growled. We have maybe 30 minutes before it goes critical and makes very big hole. Then, we work fast, Eris said. He explained the plan to Kale. We need to wire the core to broadcast the soft, healing frequency. Use the ship's skeleton as an antenna. Grant says he can rig it, but it has to be done from inside the chamber. Once it's activated, the feedback loop will be irreversible. Whoever is in there when we throw the switch will be fused into the resonance, Kale finished, understanding. He looked at the ancient spire, then, at the shattered luminous in the chamber behind him. It will be a tomb. And a monument. Grant snorted. Good tomb. Is loud tomb. He began hauling cables. It was a frantic, final collaboration. Kale provided the precise frequency data from his research on the survivors. Lynn, from the broken bridge, jury-rigged a transmission link from the ship's black box. Jax and the others helped ferry equipment through the torn corridors of the Odyssey. With 5 minutes left on Grant's estimate, it was ready. The core chamber glowed with a dangerous, beautiful blue light. The air hummed with pent-up energy. Eris looked at his crew, gathered at the chamber's ragged entrance. I'll do it. It's my ship. No, Captain, Kale said, stepping forward. His face was smeared with grime and soot, but his eyes were clear. Your job was to get us here. My job is the science. The cure. Let me finish it. Besides, he added, a faint, sad smile touching his lips, I've spent my life afraid of wide-open spaces. This chamber is cozy. No one argued. There was no time for grand farewells. They clasped hands, a quick, hard grip of understanding. Kale turned and entered the chamber. The heavy, makeshift door, cut from hull plating, was sealed behind him. Eris led the surviving crew out of the wreck, stumbling across the gray dust to a safe distance. They turned and watched. For a moment, nothing. Then, a deep, foundational hum began to emanate from the crashed Odyssey. It was a sound felt in the bones more than heard. The sound grew, harmonizing with the natural frequency of the planet. The inert gray dust around the ship began to glow with a soft, aquamarine light. The light pulsed like a gentle heartbeat and raced outwards in a wave, up the spire, across the plains, into the dead forests and rivers. Where the wave passed, a subtle change occurred. The gray didn't vanish, but it began to glisten. And, in the grand chamber, the surviving luminous, those who had endured the violent purge, stopped their pain chiming. Their fractured bodies were bathed in the soft, resonant light. Their inner flickers grew steadier, stronger. The terrible cracks in their forms didn't heal instantly, but the bleeding of light from them stopped. The silent, gentle song of the Odyssey's heart was holding them, sustaining them. Kale had done it. He had turned a crash site into a cradle. High above, the Ventari Sentinel and the IK-Aran dartships watched, sensors recording the unprecedented bioresonant phenomenon. The galaxy, through 1,000 live feeds hacked by Lin, watched too. They watched as humanity's wrecked ship sang a lullaby to a world everyone else had given up for dead. And, in that song, an entire galactic civilization's cold logic was challenged, note by defiant note. Document 5. The song of the Odyssey did not fade. It settled into the bones of the world, a low, perpetual hum that vibrated through the very rock and air. In the grand chamber, now illuminated by the gentle, pulsing aquamarine light radiating from the crash site, a miracle in slow motion was unfolding. The luminous who had survived were not healed. Not yet. Their forms remained cracked, their light dim. But they were stable. The violent, invasive gray was gone, replaced by the inert, glittering mineral scar tissue. And the song was teaching their bodies to remember how to grow. Tiny, almost imperceptible tendrils of new, healthy crystal were beginning to form along the edges of the worst fractures, seeking each other out. It would take years, centuries perhaps, for them to be whole. But they were alive. The chorus, though whispered, continued. On the surface, the human and IK-Aran survivors became caretakers. They set up a permanent camp between the chamber and the wreck, which they now called the Heartspire. Captain Aris, his arm in a sling from the crash, stood with Flight Marshal Kriek of the IK-Aran, looking at the softly glowing ship. Your engineer, Kriek rasped, his multifaceted eyes reflecting the light. He fused himself with the core to stabilize the final frequency modulation. His stubbornness is now part of the song. Aris nodded. Grant would have liked that. Said he always wanted to be part of something that wasn't breaking. He looked up at the sky. The Ventari Sentinel was gone, recalled by its government. The political storm in the galactic concord was raging. The IK-Aran had officially, and scandalously, broken ranks to establish a protective medical cordon around the planet. They're calling it the human dilemma on the newsfeeds, Lin said, walking up to them, a datapad in her hand. Her leg was bandaged, but she moved with purpose. A philosophical crisis. Is uncompromising compassion a strategic liability or the highest form of civilization? The debates are tearing the Concord apart. Good, Aris said simply. He looked toward the Heartspire, where Kale's team was now working with a new generation of scientists, xenobiologists from a dozen curious, sympathetic species who had defied their governments to come and study, to help. The planet was no longer a quarantine zone. It was a sanctuary, and a university. The real change, however, was not political. It was cultural. The story of the Odyssey and the song of the luminous world spread through the galaxy not as a dry report, but as an epic poem, a symphony, a holodrama. Species that had always viewed emotions as a private weakness found themselves moved. Young Ventari, their logic challenged, began questioning the sterile doctrines of absolute efficiency. Engineers on mining colonies started taking greater safety risks to save trapped comrades, citing human-style operational parameters. But the most profound impact was on humanity itself. Back on Earth, the response was not triumph, but a solemn, united reflection. They had not conquered. They had not won a war. They had simply refused to look away. Ships bearing the name and spirit of the Odyssey began construction, not warships, but vast, mobile medical and engineering academies, staffed by volunteers from every nation. Their mission, to go where the Concord would not, to help those deemed beyond help. They called it the Odyssey Initiative. Years passed. The luminous world, now officially named Echo in the stellar catalogs, became a place of pilgrimage. The Heart Spire, with the remains of the Odyssey and Grant eternally at its center, was a monument visited by beings from across the spiral arm. They came to hear the song, to feel its vibration, and to understand. On the 10th anniversary, Eris, now an ambassador for the Odyssey Initiative, stood before the first fully healed Luminous. It was the one who had been smallest and most cracked in the chamber. Now, it stood tall, its crystal form clear and strong, its inner light a steady, joyful gold. Its chime was translated for the gathered crowd of many species. You gave us back our song, it chimed. But, you gave the galaxy a new one. A song of hands held in the darkness. A song that says you are not alone. Eris placed a hand on the warm crystal. We didn't give it. We just reminded everyone it was a song they could choose to sing. Later, under the twin moons of Echo, Eris met with Kale, who had aged but whose eyes held the same fierce curiosity. They looked at the stars, where the running lights of a new human-led relief vessel, the Grant's Resolve, winked into view, accompanied by IK-Aran escorts and even one curious Ventari science vessel. They're still arguing about us in the Concord halls, Kale said, smiling. Let them argue, Eris replied, his gaze fixed on the stars. While they debate the philosophy of compassion, our ships are out there, doing the work. The galaxy turned its back once. It won't be so easy for them to do it again. Because now, everyone knows, humanity will step forward. And, we won't be alone. In the gentle hum of the world, in the new ships heading for new crises, in the healed light of the Luminous, the message was clear. The act of one reckless, compassionate crew had not just saved a world. It had irrevocably changed the soundtrack of the cosmos. The final, unspoken truth of the story was not that humanity was special, but that humanity had given the galaxy permission to be kind, and, in doing so, had discovered they were never truly alone in that desire. The Song of Echo was a lullaby for the wounded, and a wake-up call for the universe.